All right, we're not quite ready to start, but thank you so much for the raid, Rosa. Welcome in, Rosa Raiders. So glad to have you all here. We'll get started in just a little over a minute. Okay, now we've gone to the music twice, and now we're ready. Welcome, everyone, to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. Thank you so much for coming tonight. My guest tonight is Lacey Artemis. Lacey is she calls herself a creative Swiss Army knife, currently residing in Toronto, Canada. She's a talk show host, a Twitch streamer, a published author, graphic designer. We love our graphic designers here, of course, musician, and so much more. Lacey is also neurodivergent and LGBTQ+, which is why she's here. You can find her on most social media platforms under Artemis Creates, sometimes with the underscore. We'll get it in the chat in a minute, or if one of my mods would love to go ahead and do that, find her Instagram. It's here under her name, but if we could get a link in chat, that'd be awesome because I didn't get that set up. Without further ado, please everyone welcome to the show, Lacey. Hi, hon.
Hello. So nice to be here.
It's so wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for agreeing to do the show. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
We started the thing so casually today with a pre-stream, and of course it's Toxic Tuesday, so we were doing that, and I just feel like in a much looser mode, so I gotta get focused and get professional here. Again, thank you so much, Rosa, for the raid. I hope all you raiders are having a good night tonight. I know that you were watching Rosa's Transgender Day of Awareness stream, because in Australia they're in the future. So let's go ahead and get started on the show. Before I do that, I gotta cover two pieces of business really quick, and that is, we really love to have your questions throughout the show. So if you have any questions for Lacey or for me, go ahead and ask them in the chat. Type at the Transverse first, and it will show up here in my chat. It'll highlight it for me so I can see it easily. The other thing is that Lacey, my one rule for guests is they cannot watch the chat. So if you have any comments for her, just know that she can't see them directly. I will have to pass those on to her. But if you want to type at the Transverse in front of that, it'll be easier for me to catch those as well. But I'm pretty good about following the chat. And I just want to take a quick second to say hello to everybody that's here. Let's switch screens over here on this side so I can see everybody easily. I know Julie's here. I know Jeannie's here. Cyrek, welcome in. Extreme Hedgehog. I'm missing a lot because the chat's going nuts all of a sudden. Let's see. A lot of hellos. Julie's got since Rosa rated over here, Julie's got 3 different tabs open, all with the intro music going.
Yeah,
So,
I'm hosting your channel and my channel right now as well. So.
Nice. Well,
Figured it
thank you for
made
that.
sense.
Yeah. So let's get started. Let's start off with a really simple one. How do you identify?
I identify as trans feminine. I don't identify as a not as a binary trans woman, but nothing against that. It's just for me, I realize that trans feminine is the label with all considered that feels like the best fit for me, and non-binary, I guess, as well.
Okay. Rose is saying, tell Lacey hello, Toronto from Toronto.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
What did?
Rosa lives in Toronto, Australia,
Oh, she
apparently.
does? How did I miss that? Oh my God. Okay.
So
Terrible friend.
so yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I had talked to her a little bit last year before I kind of got really busy with it, and I was saying like, oh, we should do like a kind of tag team video where you talk about like fun facts about Toronto, Australia, and I do fun facts about Toronto, Canada, and we can make a video together. And I just have not had time to actually do that since suggesting it. But I think it'd be a fun idea to do that.
So you suggested this great idea and then just left her hanging.
Yes, I know. Tisk tisk, bad Lacey.
Tonto. All right. So I like to start at the beginning now, also early on in the show, with one of my favorite questions. How did you choose your name?
So yeah, this comes up on Twitter semi regularly, and basically when I was trying to pick my name, a lot of the very common popular names like Katie and Sarah and Emily and Sophie and Ashley, like those very like kind of feminine girly names, like a lot of them appealed to me, but I either already knew a lot of people with that name or I had family members with that name, and so I and I also wanted something a little bit less common.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, like I actually really do love lace, like the actual like fabric or texture or whatever it be considered. I've always loved it, and the name Lacey, it looks great in cursive, and that's another thing I love. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah, it stuck. It worked.
That's the true sign of a good graphic designer is that, you're thinking of your name in terms of how it will look in different forms and different fonts and things like that. I love that.
Yeah.
All right, Julie, we'll get your question after the break. So again, on the questions, I will ask them throughout if I have time or if they're pertinent to what we're talking about. And if not, or if I don't get around to them for some reason, we will do them after the break. And for some reason, OBS does never likes to copy stuff very well. Um, so moving on, when did you realize you were different, and what were the early clues for you?
So, yeah, I was trying to think of if I want to order this like chronologically or it was roughly 4 years ago when or 4.5 years ago when I officially started identifying as non-binary, and about 6 months after that, I kind of cracked my egg completely. But the signs were kind of there probably from as early as I can sort of remember being a young kid,
Hmm.
and just never feeling like masculinity, especially like macho masculinity, it never appealed to me. It never felt like that was just not I don't want to be that. I don't really want anything to do with that. And
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the weird part, because a lot of people, a lot of trans people, it's like, no, that's not me. This is me. I'm supposed to be this instead. And for me, it was just that part wasn't there for some reason. I don't know why exactly. It was just,
Okay.
well, no, this isn't me, but that's kind of, and it was just like, okay, but I didn't at that time. I didn't feel like, no, I'm supposed to be a girl instead. But kind of looking back, there were other signs like I always preferred the company of girls, and I tried to live vicariously through girls in my life a lot and women in my life, and kind of once I was in my kind of mid to late 20s, I started to like notice like women's fashion, women's clothing and styles and colors, and just it spoke to me. It caught my attention, and I just started to look like, if to use a Simpsons reference, there's that episode where they have these like really boring uniforms at school, and everyone just kind of becomes like a zombie, and then they get rained on, and then they turn into Technicolor, and everyone just kind of like wakes up. And that's kind of how it felt to me when I started noticing girls' clothes, and I looked at guys' clothes, just like, this is so boring and uninspired. It's lifeless. And no offense to any masculine or male identifying people that are watching, just that's just how it was for me. And once for me, the moment was going to a thrift store and trying on a dress for the first time, and it clicked.
Hmm. And what brought that on? How did you get to the point of trying a dress on in the shop?
Yeah, so there was a private event being organized by a friend of mine that was basically for all like queer, trans, non-binary, and like agender people, and it was being held at a private space. So you could come and you could, dress however you wanted. You could even, if you were kind of gender fluid, you could kind of change throughout the event, that sort of thing. And I knew that I wanted to go and use that opportunity to try, being a woman, and
Huh.
so I needed to get some attire for that, and that's why I needed to go and get a dress.
Very cool. Yeah, I love that was sort of your first attempt and first expression was just going straight for the dress. That's awesome. Um, when you first realized that you were trans, did that cause any issues for you? Did that bring up any kind of fears or anything? I mean, under the trans umbrella.
Um, I mean, I suppose, like, obviously before I came out, I was, the usual concerns, like, I'm not sure how my family's gonna take this, I'm not sure how it's gonna go over at work, and, um, but I wasn't so much nervous about it socially because I had before I like, part of me coming to identify as non-binary was, like, meeting lots of other non-binary, queer, trans people, and just opening up my mind to those possibilities more, and instead of it just being, "Well, that's just how some people are," it's like, well, that could maybe be me, and do I want that to be me? And I was very fortunate because one of my boss's best, like, close personal friends was a trans woman that she'd known for years already,
Hmm.
and my family was pretty good. I mean, certainly, I know that it ends up pretty badly for a lot of people,
Yeah.
and what I did notice, and it kind of makes sense, is that the younger people in my family, like my sister and my cousins, were a lot more able to roll with it, and like my parents and my aunts and uncles were, um, they try to be supportive, but they were also kind of just like, I don't really know what to do with this.
Hmm. Because you were at that point you were defining yourself as non-binary.
I didn't come out to my family that way. It was because I was still kind of figuring things out, but then once
Okay.
I realized, like, no, I need to like live as a like a girl, a feminine person, then it was like, okay, well, this is obviously going to be a total change from what everyone's used to. So, I had to, come out with it.
Hmm. And then, so you kind of alluded to that your story coming out was actually, it sounds like it was pretty easy, right?
From the kind of stories and the what I've heard from other trans people, it seems like I was in the very like probably the luckier minority, kind of all considered, yeah.
Hmm. Who did you come out to first? And what was that? What prompted that choice?
I think the first people that I kind of came out to, I mean, it's been 4 years now, and my long term memory kind of sucks. But I think it was just when I was first starting to like look for places that I could be the new me kind of thing. So like events for new or questioning youth, or like actually one of the first groups I went to was I think it was called Autistic Queers. So it was a
Oh.
group for autistic people who were also gender nonconforming in some fashion.
Hmm.
And I made a couple of friends from that were really helpful for me in kind of my first year or so.
Hmm.
And then for my friends that I already knew, it was kind of a slow, careful process of kind of first coming out to like, maybe about a half dozen really close personal friends
Yeah.
who I was very confident would be cool with it. And then
Hmm.
there was sort of like tiers of like, okay, the next tier of people that I think are probably going to be cool with it, but and then sort of further and further. And then once I had, kind of gained enough confidence from coming out to these several like layers and waves, then it's like, okay, now it's just I'm going all out now.
Mhm. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, and I've never thought of this before, but yeah, that's sort of how you do it. You start with the core, and then you go out, very much like planning a wedding. They're like the family people that you have to invite, and then there's like, oh, if we invite them, we have sort of have to invite these people, and then like it changed into a whole bunch of people. But that's kind of awesome. I love that. I love that I finally kind of saw that tie in a funny way. Um, who was the hardest person for you to come out to?
I guess, like, looking back at it now again, because my memory is really kind of hazy about it now. So the sort of most obvious answer that comes to mind for me is my father. Um, and that's not something I want to get too deep into, but
Mhm.
that was, I mean, not that he wasn't supportive in some ways, but it still wasn't quite what I had hoped. And yeah, I guess that's about what I'll say about that right now.
Okay. And then did you have anybody, I love asking this question because I had some really kind of interesting people that I wasn't expecting to accept me, at least not to the level that they did. Did you have anybody like that that surprised you that to the level they accepted you, or the fact that they accepted you at all?
Honestly, I was kind of surprised by my sister, and in looking back at it, it was kind of silly.
Mhm.
Because like my sister, Uh, she's a little bit more old-fashioned compared to me, but, she's also shown me that, like, the way that she has, raised her kids, that she's been extremely supportive and open-minded, and, she even kinda said, I think at one point that, she appreciated that, like, as an opportunity to, help encourage her kids to be more, like, open to different things. And
Wow.
yeah, and just my relationship with my sister has been kind of, it used to be more sort of, I don't know how to say it exactly, like, not bad, but, like, it was we've bonded over certain things, but we're not exactly, like, super close. And
Mhm.
so it just, yeah, I wasn't quite expecting her to be as supportive as she was, but I certainly appreciated it.
So then when so you mentioned and I forget I forget what you called the organization that you joined in with, that where you found autistic people that were
Mhm.
trans. Um, was that your first community, and did that community stick? Were you able to find a lot of friends from that?
Yeah, I've actually still got several friends that I met through that kind of, autistic plus trans or autistic plus queer, sort of network and circle.
Hmm.
Um, I do remember that there was one specific Facebook group that was just for, like, trans women who identified as generally more feminine. And that I was very, like, in sort of the first, I guess, year or so, I was very active on there, very, like, deep, and trying to just connect with anyone on there who would connect with me, and
Hmm.
just to kind of find that, like, that kind of acceptance and support and community, and the memes, and people answering questions. And eventually I kind of reached a point where I felt more sort of, I guess, secure in kind of the state of things, and didn't feel like I needed as much support. So I still had friends, but yeah, I kind of, after about a year and a half, or maybe 2 years, I think I kind of graduated more just to, like, living my life and just having the friends I had and meeting new people along the way. But I don't spend a ton of time in kind of support groups anymore.
Hmm. When you were going through that and you were, building up your network and finding community, did you have a particular person that you looked up to, or a particular confidant that you could um, bounce questions off of?
This is one of the ones that I think I put an extra note down about. I'm just trying to find it.
Hmm.
Uh, um, that was not the one. So what was the question again? Sorry.
Did you have a particular role model, or confidant, somebody you could confide in that had experience with this, or like I said, a particular role model? A lot of people look up to suddenly Samantha, maybe like a Casey Blake, Megan Bound, the Transvengers.
Yeah, when I was first starting to transition, I know that the like Steph Senyati was a prominent YouTuber. I know she doesn't do YouTube anymore.
Okay.
There was also I used to watch ContraPoints a while ago, and I kind of fell out of her stuff, kind of partly due to the controversy and partly because it's just hard to sit through really long videos.
Mm-hmm.
I did think some of her kind of earlier content was really solid, and yeah, the two people that I kind of met at that first Autistic Queers meeting, I'm still sort of loosely in touch with one of them, but they were both really helpful, and one of them actually helped connect me to the trans therapist that I eventually saw to kind of help facilitate me through the first kind of year and a bit.
Okay. And that was, yeah, that dovetails nicely into the next question, which was like basically how did therapy play a part in your transition? Did you have somebody for that kind of side of things throughout all of it?
Yeah, I actually ended up with a trans man as a therapist, but he was really great
Hmm.
um,
Wow.
and and very like sensitive, and I certainly appreciated that. And again, I wish that my memory was better at this point because I know that's like probably like three years ago now or something. And but I mean, it definitely helped. Like kind of everything in confluence helped me kind of reach a point where I felt like I was more able to continue sort of walking forward, not entirely on my own, but more independently.
Hmm. Yeah. So as you got into that, what did you kind of discover, or what were the innate things that you ran into that were your key fears in transitioning?
I think a lot of it was trying to like understand kind of the options with the different surgeries or the name change stuff, like because a lot of that was not well explained. Like you kind of have to go into the communities or the forums to kind of get information, and then like some places would have like policies about like you can't make recommendations or you can't tell people to do a certain thing.
Hmm. Yeah.
um, and I mean, yeah, I think that's obviously a big kind of stumbling block for a lot of trans people, is trying to figure out the surgery stuff, and what surgeries like do you want, and can you afford them, or where are you going to get them, or are you going to have support to kind of recover and things like that. And the name change, again, for me, it went very smoothly. And yeah, I think that again, I'm regretting that my memory is not a little bit more firm at this point. Hopefully that answers the question, though.
Yeah, yeah, that's totally good. Um, yeah, I just found out today. I've had the paperwork on my desk for a while, but I just was actually finally going through it and found out that my name change is going to be almost $1,000.
Mm, that's
I guess it's
is
just,
that specific to your state or?
I guess so, yeah. So apparently the court fees themselves are like 435, something like that. And then you have to publish 4 consecutive weeks in a newspaper, one day, 4 consecutive weeks, and the newspaper apparently charges like $350 for that.
Hmm,
And then I was trying to make it super easy and simple in the whole thing, and went through LegalZoom, and they gathered all the paperwork, which was great. But that was like $120. I thought that was, just gonna make it easy and whatever. I didn't realize that there were all these other charges on top of it too.
hmm.
But
Yeah, I think here
yeah,
in Canada, I mean, I'm in Ontario and I can only speak for Ontario, but
mhm.
I think it was something like maybe like $150 or something like that. That's what my memory is saying, but I don't know if that's correct anymore. But yeah, it wasn't $1,000, man. That's that's basically like I mean, yeah, I think I paid like $2,000 for like a year of laser hair removal, so that's expensive.
Yeah, I think that would pretty much finish my laser hair removal. You know, 'cause I'm getting pretty close to the end on the beard here. I had one about a month ago, and looks like I'm doing pretty well here. So it's just like, yeah, I
Yeah.
think another another few $100s, I'd be good. So I could probably even I could use that money to get done with laser and even probably put the rest towards FFS or something. But
Yeah, I actually still need to get a little bit of electrolysis because, in case any of the viewers don't know, laser hair removal doesn't actually get rid of 100% of the hair. Some
hmm
of it is still kind of left. It's just basically like little baby white hairs,
yeah.
and like you can't really see them, but like I can still feel them, and they bother me, like because I have sensory issues. So I still do kind of shave every few days, even though no one can really tell. But I want to eventually get them taken care of. So.
Well, yeah, it's just a matter of like right now I'm in that weird period where I'm old, so I have a lot of the white hairs coming in, and but I still have the black ones, so I have to do foundation to cover it. And then if you've
Mm.
got hairs coming through like the white ones, then you end up with kind of a bumpy complexion. It looks terrible. So not
Mm.
fun. Um, have your transition goals shifted as you've gone through? It sounds like they kind of have. It sounds like how you identified changed. Were there any things that you saw from the beginning that you thought you would do that you've kind of changed your mind on, or the opposite where you didn't think you would kind of go through certain steps and now you're looking forward to those?
Um, I guess certainly kind of on the like the surgeries front of things. I have like as you mentioned, I also would like to get some facial feminization surgery, but that would have to be completely out of pocket. And I had a hair transplant, and that alone was like took me like 2 years to pay off.
Wow.
And I don't really want to go through that again. But at the same time, like I know this is one of the later questions, but like my brow bone is definitely like my most thing that causes me the most dysphoria. So it's something I think about, but I'm like, I've kind of accepted it may never happen, and I'm kind of at peace with that, and kind of a similar thing for, the big surgery that takes the longest to recover from. Like, it's kind of a like, it'd be nice, but the recovery aspect has kind of scared me off because like here in Ontario, that can be covered under health insurance, so I wouldn't have to pay for that out of pocket, but I would have costs incurred from, the recovery and everything.
Yeah. We have one of our guests in the chat is leaving because it's super late where they're at.
Mhm.
But they had asked a question that I want to make sure we got to before they bailed. So there have been some answers in the chat, but I thought it'd be interesting to bring up. Is it better to say "Yay, hurrah" when someone comes out, um, or is something more akin to "Thank you for telling me, nice to meet you, Lacey" better? Should we make their coming out into terms with themselves a big deal, or is it counterproductive? What are your thoughts on that?
I think for me, it would depend on the person and kind of their disposition or their sort of vibe. Like certain people, if when they come out, I would kind of expect them to be a bit more exuberant, and so I'd be like, "Oh yeah, awesome, woohoo,
hmm
congrats!" And for other people, maybe it seemed more obvious, like it was a more deeply considered, I don't know what the right. I can't find the right words, but when it just if it had a bit of a more like not somber vibe, but a more just cathartic vibe, maybe
Yeah.
it would be maybe more just like thanks for telling me. It's really cool, and here for you kind of thing.
hmm Yeah, I really agree with that, and that came up in the chat too. Is just that thank you for telling me, thank you for having the courage or for having the faith in me to feel that you were comfortable enough to tell me. I appreciate it, kind of a thing. It's
Hmm.
so Kareem Shot, thank you so much for coming. I hope you have a great night, and yeah, there'll be more to watch on the VOD, but I wanted to make sure we got to your question live. What are some of the key aspects of your life and your presentation that make you feel the most valid?
Well, I can definitely say that my hair is sort of the thing that gives me the most euphoria.
That's a big help,
It,
right? So
I,
big.
I So I actually started growing my hair out, I think in grade 11, and I grew and I had like basically like metalhead hair. And I had that for about I think 10 or 12 years, and I was kind of going through this phase where I sort of blamed a lot of things on the wrong stuff, and I kind of felt like, I'm just having trouble with like dating and just and I kind of got occasional comments about just it didn't look good, and you look like a girl and stuff like that, and I kind of it got to a point where I just like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna go clean cut and short hair and see if it makes a difference and kind of try it. And literally within like 6 months, I was like, that was a huge mistake. But
Mm-hmm.
I was in a job at the time where I couldn't have it back, so I kind of had to just kind of live with it for a little while. And then in my current job, which I started it, there's basically no like client facing aspect of it, so it wasn't an issue, and so I was able to start. So it's literally taken me 4 years to get it back to this point, and I just like it's such the point. I'm so like attached to my hair that like even hearing of other people cutting theirs like makes me just like, don't stay away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I guess like I will admit, and I don't post a ton of selfies online for various reasons, but not having any like I don't wear much makeup, but like not having any on definitely makes me feel like I look in the mirror makeupless, and it's hard for me to see Lacey a lot of the time still.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while I kind of get lucky and I catch the right angle, but yeah, I feel like I might be diverting away from the original question now.
No, and that's funny. It was a weird thing for me to kind of grasp and adjust to, is those um, both sides of that coin, where fully done up and in a dress and everything, and it's basically just as pretty as I can make myself, and I would just see a dude in the mirror. It was just such a bummer, just so dysphoric and deflating. And then other
Yeah,
times, even sort of unshaven, I could walk past the mirror and I'd be like, "Oh, there she is," and it would just be at weird random times, and I could never figure out what it was. I know that hormones help with that, and I wasn't on hormones at the time, but there were just you know those days where you were just really settled into yourself and you really felt like you, and then you saw it in the mirror. It's so wonderful to have that.
yeah,
So.
it's a good point with the hormones, because I was just gonna say that was another really big one. I think it took like at least a year and a half before my face was like noticeably different to me, and kind of even without makeup, it's like, okay, at least that face is more feminine than it used to be.
Mhm.
And I know that a lot of trans people, when they start hormones, it's this great impatience of like, okay, how quickly am I going to see these changes, and just being dying for them because they can be so validating. And I have a design in my merch store, which is it's a play on the name Estradiol Valerate, and I made a design that has the estrogen molecule and it says validate, so it's like estradiol validates or estrogen validates, and it's a very like trans femme centric idea, but
Mhm.
I kind of thought it was kind of cute, so I made a design out of it, and it is kind of how I feel. It's like estrogen is magic, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's just kind of funny how it does do those great things that you kind of weren't expecting. Because again, we've been fighting against this for so long, trying to fit into the masculine ideal and all of that, and it just never felt right. And we just, for myself, I just felt less than always, and was, like, why don't I understand life so well? And then, um, you start on hormones and living as your true self, and it's just like, oh, okay, I get it now. Yep, yep. That's why it didn't make sense, because it wasn't right. It didn't make any sense on any level, much less the parts that I was struggling with. So
Mhm.
these days, what we could sort of talked a little bit about it, but what are the key things that cause you dysphoria?
Yeah, like I said, definitely my brow bone. I I feel like people have told me that it's not as bad as I think it is, but I know obviously we always are more of our harshest critic. I I do kind of have like, I mean, I'm tall and skinny, so that does kind of work in my favor, in terms of being like more conventional feminine beauty. But
Mm-hmm.
my structure and my proportions are like, I can wear certain things to kind of cheat it, but if I'm like, even to this day, if I'm wearing like a loose top, even if there's like a bra underneath, I still am always like, like I look flat, and still having a little bit of a bulge, and like I'm not as bothered by that anymore. But it's, just sometimes just being aware of things that don't bother me as much, but I know that other people notice and
Yeah.
will not have the reaction that I would like, or would not just, not care like they should.
Mhm.
And like, voice, my voice, depending on the day, sometimes it's more kind of where I want it to be, and other times it's not. And um, it's another thing that, like, when I do my show, the show must go on. So even if I don't like my voice, I just
Mhm.
have to do it anyways. And after many years of I've kind of gotten used to it more so, and yeah, it is what it is.
Mhm. Yeah, there's two things, and we did talk about this a little bit in the pre-interview about how, when you go back and you listen to old tape or whatever, you realize that your voice, even when you feel like it's deep, isn't as deep as it used to be. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, it's hard. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of practice, and I generally find that as the interviews go on, as we talk more and more, my voice gets tired, my throat gets tired, so it drops down, and then I just kind of like lose that focus, and then as soon as we bring it up, then it's just like right back up there.
Yeah, it's kind of an advantage of sorts on my show because I'm the interviewer, so I can mostly let the guests just talk, and I don't have to talk as much. But yeah, that's not always the case.
Apparently, I haven't really learned that trick. I talk, I feel like a lot. uh,
I learned the hard way through just having to do so much extra editing.
yeah, yeah. So through your transition, what are the things that you feel have been the biggest hurdles for you? Or, if you didn't have like hurdles and blocks, were there learning curves, things that you had to kind of learn and get used to that you weren't expecting?
I'd say one thing, and this is something I've kind of heard as kind of common, is like just suddenly, like, obviously, like, well, I shouldn't say obviously, we don't necessarily just have to be like, oh, I have to buy tampons now, like you potentially do if you get bottom surgery. But it's like, just getting bras, and like not knowing, because just there's things that girls learn when they're growing up that we don't get, and so we kind of have to like figure that. And it feels silly if you're like, in your 30s or 40s, and you're like just asking things that like a teenage girl knows.
Yes.
And just feeling kind of silly, but also recognizing like, no, it's not. Why would I know this? I shouldn't be expected to know this, unless maybe you were much more like grew up more progressively, and you talked to your female friends or your female siblings, and kind of learned some of that stuff peripherally. And I guess another thing is like I just started using a period tracker app kind of sometime last year, and because I don't bleed, that's kind of the most obvious, easy way to kind of know what's going on. Otherwise, you kind of almost have to like guess a little bit.
Mm.
But then that's just kind of been interesting too.
Because you're still feeling emotional changes and stuff like that during that period.
Well, it's just trying to figure out like, because there's no blood, so it's like there is a point where obviously I'm on my period, but there's not that super obvious signifier. So I have to figure out how else can I tell. And basically, all I've been able to determine is like usually for about 3 or 4 days, I'm normally very emotional already, but when I'm that kind of small little window, it's just like I am so overly emotional, it's ridiculous.
Mm. Yeah, I still gotta
Um,
keep my eyes open for that. I don't know that my hormone levels have balanced out enough or correctly to that point. I still need to get another blood test, but it's an interesting thing I have to look forward to.
yeah, and I actually another one that just sort of occurred to me, like because I've done both pill, like sublingual pill estrogen, and
Mhm.
I've done like injections, and kind of like there's some logistics to figure out there, like how do you know the right place to put it, and do you do it like butt or thigh, and like, and then there's this thing I learned of literally just like for the first time last year called boofing, and I don't know where that term came from, but it's apparently very common. And so I'd be like, okay, what is that? And then, okay, do I want to try that? And then, okay, does it seem like it's making a difference or not? And just, again, lots of stuff that you just have to suddenly be like, okay, I have to figure this out, and start doing this. And just kind of out of nowhere, sort of.
So is there a suppository version of estradiol, or are you just taking the regular pills
Oh
and
no, that was for progesterone.
for progesterone? Okay.
But you can also take that orally. It's just apparently not as effective, but it still works for me.
Okay. You know, we had you hit on something there with the injections that triggered some thoughts of what we talked about yesterday about the fears. And I know we
Mhm.
kind of didn't cover this so much today, but I really loved, um, yeah, I I love that you were talking about that you had fears with the needles themselves, and if you
Mhm.
can expand on that if you'd like. But dating. You said you had a lot of fears of dating, and you did kind of allude to the fact that you were struggling a little bit before. Um, how did that play into your transition, and how was that worked out for you?
Do you want me to answer the needle thing first?
Yeah, yeah, if you'd like to.
Okay.
I was just throwing that out there
Yeah,
as a because that's what triggered my memory of the depth of what
yeah,
we talked
yeah.
about.
No, it's. I was gonna say because like I'm pretty sure that most people do not like needles, and it's
Hmm.
kind of just one of those things when I realize like, okay, this is the like the safe, well, not maybe not the safest, this is the most effective and best way to get estrogen as a trans woman or trans feminine person, or potentially just non-binary, whatever.
Hmm.
And so I had to kind of get taught by a nurse like how to do it, and then I started doing it myself. And like I I kind of like over time I like I guess I sort of like lost track of like where I was supposed to do it, or like because I was always finding the spot while I was sitting down, and I started to realize that I was thinking that I was pointing to a certain part of my leg, but because of the way my leg had kind of like come to rest and how I was sitting, that
Uh-huh.
I was, and so I kind of had to like relearn because if you put the needle in and it hurts, like that's a sign that you shouldn't have put it there. And that, but a lot of times, like, well, I don't want to have to do it again, so I'll just do it I'll just do the injection anyways. And one time I had like the leg that I injected into, like my foot was kind of feeling a little bit like kind of tingly and like slightly numb, and my leg that leg felt like a different temperature than the rest of my body. And it was this really weird thing, and I was like,
Ooh.
that doesn't seem like that should happen. And so I went to the emergency room, and they like kind of checked everything out, and it's like, no, because this was hours later, like, no, you're fine. And
Huh.
because of that experience, like I've kind of instituted like a bit of a rule or a practice that I try to do my injections before noon, because at least that way I give myself, 6 to 8 to 10 hours, to for anything. If anything's gonna go
Mm-hmm.
wrong, I'll probably know it by then, because I don't want to go to sleep and not wake up. That's like I'm a
Yeah.
hypochondriac, and I get overly paranoid about things I shouldn't.
Mm.
And this is so every time I do my injection, I still worry, is this going to be the time that I screw it up and I like inject into a vein, or I hit a nerve, or different things like that. And it feels stupid because I've been doing it for over 2 years now and never had a serious problem, but my brain just every time it's like, is this going to be the time? I still do it though, so I guess that means the fear's not completely holding me back. Um, so that's kind of that. The dating thing, like I kind of alluded to before, once I transitioned, like the first kind of year, I was just like, okay, I'm not even going anywhere near dating because I'm not like reformed yet. Like I'm in flux, and I don't expect anyone to like kind of meet this like half transitioned me and be like, yes, I want to be with you. It just didn't seem like it could happen, or it was very unlikely. And so, but I like looking back, I just kind of realized like, like of course, if you're trying to like, be someone that's not the right fit for you, or that's not the right you, or whatever, it would make sense that like it would not go as well. And it would be because again, I didn't realize that I was trying to live vicariously through women. And then because it was kind of this thought, like honestly, there was times where it was like, if I did manage to get a girlfriend and she was like the kind of like feminine that like I really kind of was drawn to, that I ultimately kind of became, then I was like, well, maybe that'll scratch that itch enough for me that I'll be okay. I'll be satisfied. I won't feel so like kind of frustrated and like deprived. And then when I like transition, I'm like, oh, now I can just do it. I can just be that now, and satisfy that feeling. And I still want to be with women, but it's like now I don't have to live vicariously through them anymore.
Hmm.
Um, And yeah, there's just this fear, and it's a common thing talked about that I've seen, that dating is harder when you're trans because a lot less people are willing to date trans people, and a lot more people are concerned about like the genitals, or
Mm-hmm.
just that kind of stuff. And I think it's getting a little bit better, a little bit by little bit, but it's still like, just I kind of realize, because I'm also gray, sexual, and like autistic, and like just a bunch of other categories that I kind of fall into, that I sort of, like, I said this to my mom one time. I was just like, yeah, I'm just my like kind of dating pool is very, very small, and I'm aware of this, and I don't have a choice in the matter, so I just have to try to make the best of it.
Hmm. And then we'll follow that sort of more challenging one up with a big softball. How do you feel that transitioning has affected your mental health?
Yeah, like I know I was kind of saying in the pre-interview that I kind of look back on it, and I don't feel like my entire time as a guy was terrible. Like, I do have some happy memories, and I did have some moments where I felt good, but since becoming and living as a woman, as like a feminine person, it's just like it's almost entirely good. It's like that's just not kind of hanging over my head anymore. That frustration's kind of gone. It's more just a frustration of the way that the world sees me, or the way that the world reacts to me. But I feel like I'm in the right place now,
Mm-hmm.
and like it's yeah. So I think that's kind of what I've heard other people say too, is just once you transition, it's just a lot of this, like, this frustration that you didn't realize the true source of it, and it just kind of lets all that air out of that balloon, and you just can move forward and have less things distracting you.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And I just think that, when you can really let yourself go into finding your true self, it just makes everything better. Are there ways in which you feel like your transition has lived up to your expectations, or any ways in which it's kind of fallen short of what you were hoping for?
um it's lived up to my expectations, I guess, that I've been able to like come to be a person that is happier with themselves and feels more true, and like I can look in the mirror and be like, wow, yeah, that's what I want to see, and I feel like kind of good and more fulfilled, kind of more selfishly and vainly. I feel like I kind of got shortchanged a little bit on the chest growth side of things, but um what are you gonna do?
Yeah, that's the problem with, especially, like, following a lot of girls on Instagram. We always like to talk about that here, about you can't control how your body reacts to hormones and things, and
Mhm.
you can't set up expectations of trying to achieve a certain look or anything when you have no idea how it's going to go for you, how the hormones are going to affect you. And so it's just more about accepting yourself than kind of setting those goals, that are things that you honestly, there's no way that you can live up to it. um,
Yeah.
so in closing out that section, and then we've got a question here from, it sounds like a cis person in the chat, that's asking about basics about being transgender. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But what advice would you have what advice do you have from your journey to pass on to young or closeted trans people out there?
I think this was actually the one that I wrote down some stuff for, because I also ask about uh, this on my show because I think it's a very valuable thing. And so I kind of have this concept on my show of like hype hats and heavy hats. And the idea being, like, hype hats are people that hype you up and encourage you and really try to like help you reach your best potential. And heavy hats are kind of the opposite. They're people that slow you down and make you doubt yourself and kind of knock you off course. And so I've come to recognize how valuable those hype hats are. Those people who will pump you up and cheer you on and want to see you succeed and be your best self, and people who get it and kind of get you. And I have the next episode that's coming out. I'll kind of spoil something that the guest said, that if your friends or people around you seem like to react negatively when you say like you want to try something new or you want to do something a little different, then that's maybe a sign that they should be excited and they should be like wanting to see that from you, like growth and change. And community, obviously, like I said, is very important. Support groups were so crucial. And I know that some people live in like more remote or smaller towns and don't really have much locally, and so they have to find what they can find online. And
Yeah.
depending on what you kind of already know, what to like search for or what to think of, like it's all out there, but can you find it by chance? Can you find it by smarts? But just trying to find the community where you can make friends and find cheerleaders and be patient and be brave. That's what I wrote down.
Yeah, all very good points. Yeah, it's all about having, like you said, you having that core group of supporters, the people that you know are going to support you because you're going through so many struggles on your own. You don't need more of those kind of people that are kind of slowing or weighing you down or making you question things when
Hmm.
you're just basically questioning everything already. And um, yeah, it's just the other thing that I do love to talk about patience, patience in people accepting you, allowing them time to do that, and then patience with the hormones and the changes and finding yourself, and like you alluded to as well, we we're going through a puberty really fast, and cis women had their entire lives to learn these things slowly and subtly, and we're trying to do a crash course in it. So it's a good thing
Yeah.
to remember. Be
Something that you
patient.
just kind of made me think of that uh, I don't think about it too often, but like something that has occurred to me at various times throughout transition was just this idea that like as once you've transitioned your whole life, you've gone into like one change room, you've been around one gender, quote unquote, and then suddenly now it's like, oh well, now if I went to a public pool with my family or my friend, well, more so my family, like I'm not used to going into like change rooms with my mom and my sister, but now I would. And it hasn't happened yet, but like, it just occurred to me that that is like a change that would happen now, and it would be that's kind of like weird because that's not the sort of thing that usually happens for cis people.
Hmm.
um, and just like to kind of reorient in my mind that like, yeah, now this is like okay, and now like it would be inappropriate to go into the change room with like boy cousins or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah,
So that's a random thought, but yeah.
it's sort of one of the learning curves. I think the things that you gotta you suddenly remember where you are and things like that of like, oh, I guess I can't really do that anymore. I guess it's sort of in a way inappropriate now for me to do these things. And then
Yeah.
allowing yourself the permission to remember that now that you're on the other side, that certain things are allowed now. Um, so yeah, so we, like I said, we have a cis person in the chat, and they asked kind of a basic question about being trans, and it's not something that we particularly answer on this channel a lot, so I thought it would be worth it to bring it up, especially since someone is actually interested, and we always appreciate when people want to become educated and want to learn about it. So they ask, and I'm just assuming because Ryan is the beginning part of your username that your name is Ryan. So I hope I can call you that, and if not, let me know in the chat. They ask, okay, so if you're transgender, you identify as the opposite gender, um, but do you still feel deep inside, um, basically, do you still feel a tie to your original gender? And I'll let you answer, and then I'll answer my own on that one.
So what that kind of made me think of was, the times when I don't do this all that often, but whenever I do end up looking back at, old pictures of me, and I've described this to different people as like it feels like I'm looking at pictures of a brother that I used to have, and
Mm-hmm.
not me, old me. And like, even my sisters kind of asked like, when I'm talking about you from, when you were a kid, I still think of you as, dead name, and I still, because that's who you were then. And like, I know that this is different for different people. Some people like, no, I was always this, I was always this name, this pronoun. I am a little bit more kind of nebulous with that stuff. But I guess, yeah, I like, to me, my old self feels like this brother that I used to have who isn't around anymore, and that's kind of, I guess about as far as I really think about it anymore. I had those experiences, but I've been very much more focused on kind of the present and the future
Hmm.
now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's just there's so many thoughts. There's so many thoughts, but the first one I think is that you we mentioned earlier in the chat, and maybe Ryan wasn't quite in here yet at that point, but that you spend your whole life trying to be the gender that everybody's telling you are. You were never that gender. Emotionally and mentally, it just always felt wrong. And so it's that what transitioning is coming to that realization of what the problem has been your whole life, and finally allowing yourself to express that and live as that. And so it's not, I mean, you can look back at photos and see, your past self, like you said, and other people still will dead name you and, call you the name you were before, and the previous pronouns. But the thing to keep in mind is that this was always our state. It was hard, and it was a struggle to try and present the way that people thought we should, or was um, congruent with the gender we were assigned at birth. But it was never right. So to look back, you're still seeing that same, you still see the same you, but you see somebody who was struggling emotionally, had a really hard time figuring out why things didn't fit, why you didn't feel like the other people that were, just seemed to. I just never understood guys. I never understood the way they thought and all that. And I'm just like, what is wrong with me that I don't understand life the way they see it? And then come to find out later what's going on. And then as you take hormones and start to present the way that you feel is right, then it's just like the lights turn on. All of a sudden everything makes sense, and you can see the world, and it just makes sense to you finally. So it's not a matter of like feeling that old self behind. It's just more of a self that was struggling and trying to find itself. And
Hmm.
um, so I hope that's a better articulation, or I hope that's a good articulation of that thought. If you want,
I do.
you can
Oh,
always whisper, DM me, Ryan, and I can try and go into it a little bit deeper if we need to.
I was just gonna say, like, it's really fascinating to me. It's almost like the nature versus nurture argument because, like, I obviously understand at this point that gender norms are like imposed upon us, and it's kind of this idea of how, most people just don't question it. They go along with it, and it seems to be fine for them.
Yeah.
I mean, you still have like tomboy girls, and maybe there'll be some more effeminate guys, but for the most part, people just kind of go with it. And it's fascinating to me to think that for some people it's just so clear that, like, no, that's not what I'm supposed to be. And when you like just putting on a certain piece of clothes, because clothing is like coded and different things are coded, and just to know and to be able to recognize that you put on a certain piece of clothing, or getting called she instead of he, or different things, and it feels different, and you can kind of tell that that's right for you. And I think that that's really interesting, and it's really unfortunate that so many people don't like that you can kind of just be like, no, this is what feels right for me. And I kind of talked in the episode of my show that's coming out next week. We also talked about the kind of connection between neurodivergence and gender divergence, and that's an interesting topic as well.
Hmm. Well, and it's kind of funny because it's it's tough when people start to to talk about religion. Not saying that that's happening in the chat right now, but I'm just saying that like a lot of religious people like to say that, you know, for some reason, you know, thanks to one translation of the Bible, that it for some reason says that being transgender is wrong, or some things. But you know, they like to talk out of both sides of their mouth, because you know it's just a shell. You know, who you are is the soul inside, and
Hmm.
the outside is the shell, and it's temporary, and then you'll move on to God. And yet they don't understand that with in terms of being transgender. And that's essentially I think the simplest way to describe it is there's who we are, and then there's the shell on the outside. And most times, for most people, the shell and the inside are the same, and sometimes it's not. And so, you know, like I said, because of your outside presentation, people assign a certain way of being to you, and behaviors and all of that sort of stuff, and a set of constraints. And you go through your life and you're like, okay, you buy into that and you try, and then it just never works until you realize that no, it's just, I was just put in the wrong shell. And unfortunately, we're not hermit crabs. We can't just, you know, slide out of that one and into another one, but it's much more of a struggle. Oh, so here's Ariel saying in the Bible it says our souls have no gender, but then they want to depict and make their own choice on gender and loving the same sex, and it's freaking stupid. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. Like I said, it's just kind of like the hypocrisy, just kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth. And in one way, like it's this way, but then over in this case where it's the same thing, where he's talking about the same thing, then it's not okay. Um, I'm going to go ahead and wrap a nice little bow on that segment there, and say that we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will talk about some more of the other questions that we got in the chat, and then move on to talking about your art and all that kind of fun stuff, and your
Okay.
shows. So we'll be right back, everybody. All right, everybody, welcome back. Thank you for letting us take a quick little break there and get some stretching in. Although I made a mistake, I've been standing for about 2 hours. I'm going to have to sit down soon. So we've got a couple questions in the chat, and then we wanted to talk about Trans Day of Visibility. So let's get through a couple of these questions real quick. If y'all have any more questions in the chat, go ahead and throw them in there. Type at the Transverse first, so it highlights for me. And they're talking now in chat. Ryan's still asking kind of questions about prisons and sports. So maybe we can get into that. But let's go through some of the questions we've got here first, and then we'll do that. First off, I love that, your show is hat collecting, and Cyric, I had it right the first time. I don't know why it didn't sound right coming out of my mouth. Cyric asks, I do need to know at some point of the stream if all of Lacey's guitars wear hats.
Oh, I love that question. I have far more hats than I have guitars, I will be honest with you, but I got my guitar out kind of recently because I do plan to I want to actually try writing like a new song on the spot for a stream. It might not work very well, but I'm going to try it. And so I got my guitar out, and it just happens to be a good little hat rack for the background. So that's why there's a hat there.
Well, and again, for aesthetics, I do love the complete purple theme. I love that you've just, really gone all into that, wearing the purple shirt and everything. You've really committed, and I appreciate that.
Just for anyone who kind of has tuned in more recently, this is not actually my design, but I found this shirt online and I had to buy it because it just makes perfect sense for me. But yeah, purple is like, I literally, if I turn my camera around and showed you the rest of my room, there's so much purple stuff. It is my color, it is my brand, and I definitely lean into it.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, we can do this one. It's usually kind of a tangent inspirer, but Julie always loves to ask, Star Wars or Star Trek? Where do your nerd loyalties lie?
When I was younger, I found Star Trek really boring and Star Wars was more exciting, but more like recently because of like all of the like extra uh Star Wars stuff, like that kind of like I don't know, I just kind of like grew out of that, I guess, and I feel like Star Trek is maybe a little bit more my speed now, but I that's to say I've pretty much only watched The Next Generation to any extent. Um, yeah. So I can't say too much about that, unfortunately.
But as long as you don't fall in like a love hate, then I think we're good. Nobody's
People
gonna,
like what they like.
yeah.
Yeah, it's all good.
So yeah, well, if she's not, well, you said you did start as as more of a Star Wars fan than anything. Um, Julie's asking, have you seen my droids? And she wants to know your opinion of those.
I'm not sure if this is like an inside joke or not. I I guess I can't say that I have.
Okay.
Maybe I should.
Yeah, for those that don't know, I have a side hustle where I custom paint the Star Wars droids that you get from Disneyland, the ones that you build there.
Okay.
They're 12 inches tall, fully remote control, and yeah, I take them, custom paint them, and sell them. So, let's I think we're gonna let chat kind of keep talking it out about what Ryan's questions about gender and sports and things like that.
I was just gonna say, I know
go ahead.
if you sorry, I just because I know that this comes up on Twitter pretty regularly, and I know there's some tweet threads out there, or there's people that tweet about it. So if you're feeling lucky and you want to go search on Twitter, you may be able to find some of those. Or actually, I think Katie Montgomery might have even covered some of that stuff in some of her videos on YouTube. So yeah, just a couple suggestions there.
Yeah, and one of the things that he just asked, that I think I do want to address really quickly is, um, the chat won't scroll up for some stupid reason. Hold on a second. Why is it getting stuck? Um, but your sex is assigned at birth, or your sex assigned at birth is your biological gender, question mark. And the thing is that's not entirely accurate. I know a lot of people like to say it's your biological gender, but the thing that forgets, and where it's really wrong, is that it assumes that your body is the biological part and that's it, and it doesn't account for the fact that your brain is also part of your biology. And those two things, your sex organs and your brain, develop in the womb at different times, and they can develop differently. I don't know if you want to believe that it's the soul, like we were talking about before, or the soul in a shell, or the fact that that those developments happen differently, but for some reason they develop differently. And so
So
the
yeah.
part of your biology that controls your emotions and your thinking and how you identify yourself, who you feel like, can be different than the outside. And so to call your genitalia your biological gender really misses at least half of what's going on there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say again because like I've learned some of what I most enjoy. I think this is one of the questions actually. I don't know if we touched on it or not, but one of the favorite things that I've learned through this whole process is just kind of more like the science behind things. And like I remember learning that like I think it was like a podcast or a video or something I saw, like why do men have nipples? And it's because like in the womb, I think it was that like every fetus starts as like a female and or like something like that and then can develop into a male and like so it's also why like if you kind of like it's kind of said as a joke sometimes, but it's not entirely meant that way. But like the clitoris is kind of just like a micro penis,
Mm,
and like a penis is just like a giant clit kind of thing. And so I think to me, if I was looking at it and like, okay, if there was these two literally completely different physical manifestations that could not possibly because like then there's intersex people who kind of fall in that kind of like gamut. So just looking at that like that, it seems more obvious to me that it's not black and white. And people who try to make it that way, I think maybe a lot of them are just trying to simplify it because it's kind of scary to not understand something and so you try to come up with explanations and you try um, to make sense of things, but there's lots of scientists out there who are telling you that that's not right and that eighth grade biology or whatever is just not the whole picture, and
mm.
more people need to listen.
Yeah, yeah, it's not as it's impossible to cut it into the black and white, male or female, the man woman thing. It's just, it isn't that cut and dried. Rosa brings up a really good point. Um, there are people born with ambiguous genitalia, some people who have more than XX and XY chromosomes. There are, different mixes of chromosomes that are different. You can just look at the human population and see that there's a vast difference in how people develop. And you bring up a really good point about biology, is that we all start exactly the same, and then the hormones diverge one way or the other. Um, like you said, but that's why we have nipples and all that, all those kinds of things. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that things would develop, differently sometimes. It just makes sense. And like I said, if you just looked at it on the surface, body types and presentations and stuff, tomboys, butch females, and you know more feminine boys and things like that. It's a spectrum. It's when you start to really try and lock into those things that it really gets confusing for everybody. And
Mhm.
and there was one other thing I kind of wanted to, let's see, where was it? I think it was here. Let's see. Um, oh, And then he mentioned trying to understand but can't fathom, and was saying a little bit about kind of getting agitated. And this is a point I kind of want to bring up. We love to welcome in everybody into the Transverse, which is our greater organization that we're putting together. And not only trans, non-binary, intersex people, but then allies and spouses and things like that. The thing to remember when you're welcome and allowed to come into those sorts of environments as someone that's an outsider and maybe doesn't understand, is that it's not the responsibility of the people in the community to convince you and to educate you. There are plenty of resources out there. There's plenty of actual scientific evidence. It's and there's plenty for you out there to go ahead and do the learning. Go through Reddit and a lot of other places. There's a lot of information out there. So, don't put it on the burden of a particular trans person you're talking to, or maybe even a group, to explain everything and make everything super clear for you. Um, and same thing as we were saying earlier, have the patience, know that, maybe you don't understand it right now, or maybe it hasn't been made completely clear for you, for the way you need to understand it, but just be patient with it and know that the answer is out there. Yeah. I mean, trans people have existed for thousands of years, and we will always be around. So
If I can do a quick shameless plug, if anyone in the chat is looking for another resource, I know there's like lots of resources out there, but so I have a series of educational ebooks that I've done in the past, and one of them is called The Curiosity Guide to Pride, and it's kind of a mixture of like kind of showing a lot of the flags and explaining kind of the meaning behind them and kind of
mhm.
some of the histories, and I designed it intentionally to be like something that could be in like a doctor's office or like a school counselor's office, or just an easy resource for like parents or teachers or doctors to kind of quickly get brushed up on some stuff beyond the like absolute obvious. And I never quite got so far as to try and like get it out into circulation. It's free, it's just there, curiosityguides.com. If you want to check that out, that might be a little bit helpful
Mm.
for you or family or friends or anybody.
Yeah, that's great. So, tomorrow is, well, in some places in the world, it already is Transgender Day of Awareness, but tomorrow is it here for us in the Western Hemisphere. Um, and I love the point that you brought up in our previous chat, about um, the fact that you don't showcase being trans in a lot of what you do. Why don't you go ahead and dive into some of that, and what you wanted to talk about on that subject?
Yeah, this kind of started, I think, with a TikTok video that I did recently where I just posed the question of like, hey, fellow trans TikTokers, do you consider yourself a trans creator or a creator who just happens to be trans? And both are obviously valid, and those aren't the only two options. But like, I know some people, literally all of their content, everything that they do centers on being trans, the experience, support, community, education, memes, all that kind of stuff. And other people, they're just trying to live their life, and they make stuff and they do stuff, and they just happen to be trans. And like, and so for me, I'm kind of a little bit more, I guess, in the middle, but more towards the like just happen to be side, because like I have done a lot of designs and art, and like my book is literally two trans main characters. All right, making a lot of noise here. And like I have had several trans people on my show, but it's not like I don't put it up front, and because not everything I do, it's like, yeah, it's a part of me. And like a lot of my designs too are just are about like other things, about like the other kind of communities that I'm part of, or just other ideas. But um I like my music because I did all of that before I was trans, so that has kind of no attachment to it. But yeah, I'm sort of answering. I feel like I was much more succinct yesterday, but just yeah, I feel like personally I'm more of a creator who happens to be trans and does do some trans content, but it's not what I want to be most known for.
Mhm.
And I don't hide it, but I also don't like. You'll never see trans flags hanging in my background unless very very specific reasons,
Well, they're not
and
purple, so
maybe.
yeah.
Yeah, so see that's the thing. At least the non-binary flag has a purple stripe, but yeah, I don't as I said to you, it kind of made me feel a little bit like a bit of a traitor to my own kind sometimes, especially in because I said to you, just like realize, oh yeah, I'm doing a show the eve of this big day, and I don't feel like I have all that much to say about it, and it's not I'm not this like flag waving trans person, but I do still try to contribute some stuff to the community, and I'm still involved a little bit, and just I've kind of found I guess what fits for me and what feels right for me.
Yeah.
And like I said, I know like some people they just want to live their life and they don't want it to all be about them being trans, and that's obviously fine. And so I guess being able to sort of selectively engage is helpful for me.
Hmm. Well, and that's why I really wanted to bring up that point as we talk about Trans Day of Visibility, and that is that being trans, being under the trans umbrella, you're valid, no matter
Mhm.
what your expression is and how, um, like how much you tout it or how much you just kind of let it be a subtle background part of you. Um, each way you identify is valid on this day of visibility. It's about you being visible as the true you and not feeling like you have to toe some particular line or be some particular advocate or being out there trumpeting the benefits of whatever anything. um, it's important to just basically make sure that we accept all trans people at this time, whatever, however you want to present and however you want to be visible, what makes you feel right, and how you want to show yourself to the world. I want to make sure that we
Yeah,
validate all of those levels of visibility for all the people under
I
the trans
think
umbrella.
I think another aspect to be honest for me is because I have seen other trans people, particularly trans women, kind of stating concerns of having like harassers or stalkers or people threatening their life, especially if they're outspoken. And I sometimes am outspoken in general, and I have really because I was I've said this to friends before that one of the changes is just when you suddenly you're just kind of now I'm living as a woman, and now all of a sudden if it's dark out and I'm walking home or something, I gotta like be looking over my shoulder. I gotta be suspicious of every guy that comes anywhere near me, and I that sucks, but that's a reality. And so I think and like also like I said, I don't post a ton of selfies online, and that's like largely because I want to keep the focus on like my art and my ideas and my creations, or the guests on my show because it's about them, not me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also because I have seen and I have heard the like the harassment and the trouble that can come along for the people who do showcase like themselves a lot more, and I that's just kind of a choice that I've made. I'm sort of being visible in the way, like I said, that sort of feels works for me and feels safe.
Mm-hmm.
um and it's because like I don't want to hide, I don't want to have to completely keep my head down, but I also don't want to be Katie Montgomery, who's a self-professed goes looking for fights on purpose on online kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
um and I admire that there's people out there that are willing and able to do that, and it's just I don't think I have that in me anymore.
Yeah. And that's what I was kind of trying to get at there, is that it's not necessary. You don't have to be that. There is just the unfortunate thing about being trans in this current environment, that the more visible you are, the more you are at risk, the more you are in in physical danger a lot of the times. Um, you
Mm,
know, so having a presentation and being out as trans to the level where you're still safe and comfortable is the most important. And like I said, I just want to make sure we celebrate that as we're celebrating all this, because I grew up as a trans person the last 2 years on Instagram. That's where I found my community of trans people, was through Instagram. And Instagram is the most curated and perfect version of everything. And it's really easy to fall in the trap of like feeling you're less than because you can't live up to an ideal or whatever, or you're not the advocate, you're not the well-spoken person that these other people are. And it's just not true. Your presentation, however you look, is you, and it's true to you, and it's good enough.
I know it can be frustrating. I'll speak from my own experience on this one because, yeah, I do see some of the accounts that, attract conventionally attractive trans women who maybe have been able to have like all the different surgeries and post these like, really amazing pic after really amazing pic. And they have, thousands or tens of thousands of followers or maybe even hundreds of thousands in some cases. And, it's easy to kind of envy that and be like, I want that much kind of like attention or audience. But because compared, it's that whole trope or thing about you post a picture of a beautiful painting, it'll get 10 likes. You post a picture of your face and you'll get 100, and it really makes you kind of feel like what you do, like okay, sure, I'm pretty, but nothing else about me matters. And that's another reason I've really tried to keep my Instagram particularly focused on like my art, and like, okay, maybe I don't get a ton of attention, but at least I feel like I have an honest idea of how popular my stuff actually is and what people actually think of it.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, Speaking of, we haven't really delved very deeply into all the things that you do. I did put a link in the chat a little bit ago. Let's see, do I still have it in the copy and paste? I do. Let me drop that in there again. This is a link to artemiscreates.com, your website, which I think then
Mhm.
basically links out to everything else, right?
That everything is there. I've more recently been starting to use Linktree. It's a
Okay.
very, very simple, clean like interface, but that's another easy way for any other creators out there who don't want to try to link to 20 different things every time. And Linktree, you can just kind of have them all in one place. And just because my website, there is a lot of stuff on there, and I think for some people it might be a little overwhelming. So yeah, I guess right now kind of the main things are my YouTube, the hat collecting show, and trying to get more into Twitch slowly but surely. And when I kind of have the time and the inspiration, I do still like to do designs and whatever else kind of strikes my fancy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, as I mentioned before, whoops, I did write my first short novel and published it last year. It's called Parker and Tucker Private Investigators. That is on my website. It's on Amazon as well. And
And
yeah, I have.
what brought about the book? What was the motivation to start writing a book? And give us a little bit about what the story is about and sort of the background behind how you came up with it.
So the genesis of the book was you- for other creatives out there, you'll know like sometimes something will pop into your head and you're just like that idea, just at its very base, is too good not to do something with. And
Mm-hmm.
so I Parker and Tucker was not actually the original name for it, and I feel like maybe I shouldn't say this because like I'll explain why in a second. It originally came into my mind as Packer and Tucker, and I thought that was really funny because it's kind of this like playful tongue-in-cheek reference that trans people would definitely get. And
Mm-hmm.
it's for both a trans man and a trans woman. And so
That's
I was
great.
I
I
was
love it. Yeah.
I was doing that, and I was like I need to do something with that. And I just like it just because it sounded like a detective duo kind of thing to me. It's like, okay, so I just sat down one day and I just started writing. And like that, and so I had that, and then I sent that to friends for like feedback. And like it was always like, there's something here, just this could be cleaned up, or this could be expanded, or this isn't really clear. And so I think the published version, I think, was the either the fourth or the fifth draft. And the story really kind of like evolved, and it centers around like a theft at the local high school from a non-binary student. And it's a kind of a mixture of like, it's kind of set in like a small town, and there's both like allies and there are very obvious like enemies and antagonists. And The Tucker character is based heavily on myself. And then sorry, I almost said Packer. Parker is kind of a mixture of like some people that I know and just kind of me filling in the blanks. But the reason I switched away from Packer and Tucker was because a few people did bring up the legitimate point that, having it be named after like a reference to transgenitals is kind of not helping our cause. And I was like, you know what,
Mhm.
that's I see that point. And so I was trying to I labored over it a lot until I finally was like, because I was so used to saying it had been months that I'd been like Packer and Tucker, and it was, and then I tried these
Funny.
different names for the Parker character, and I finally was just like, "No, you know what, Parker and Tucker, it's almost exactly the same, so I won't mess it up as much, and it still works."
Yeah.
So yeah, I had fun writing it, but also as an experience, because it's a short novel, it's a short novella basically. I think it was 30,000 words or something like that. And so knowing that like a full-length novel is like, like four times that basically, I do have ideas for other books that I want to write, but it feels like I would probably have to stop kind of most other things that I'm doing and just focus on, and I don't have that in me as much anymore. I used to do it more
Mm.
because when I did music years ago, I would literally just like spend an entire year working on an album, and that was like my primary focus. And I can't, I don't, my attention span won't really allow for that as much anymore. So I find doing my shows a little bit easier because record for 2 hours, I edit it and I put it out, and then Twitch is kind of, I can just do it whenever. And yeah, that's long messy answer.
No, that's such a great project to just sort of fall into, though. I love that. And then how did hat collecting come about?
That is kind of a culmination. So I've kind of explained this before that I about 7 8 years ago, when I sort of started on the original trajectory that I'm kind of still on, with just trying to find a creative project that would scratch my itches and make me feel fulfilled because my job didn't.
Hmm.
And I started a blog and I started a podcast, and the podcast I was interviewing people, and they were basically all people that I knew because that's who I sort of had access to. And I would interview them about their like job or their area of expertise and just try to like learn something from them and share it with my audience. And that's all what I like. I like doing that. And I did that for about a year and a half, and then I stopped for various reasons. And then a couple of years later, I was like, I miss interviewing people. I want to do that again, but I want to do it a little bit differently. So then I did like a video format thing, and I did a talk show kind of thing, but it was based around like random facts. And I had fun with that, but it was also a lot of work. And so I did 10 episodes, and then I stopped. And then a few more years go by, and I'm just like, man, I'm itching to interview people again. I I don't know why, but that just seems to like really be a thing that kind of works for me.
Hmm.
And so I was like, I need to do it again. And I but I wanted to like, because obviously I've done these different projects and I didn't want to just keep, so I kind of, I just, it's been a theme throughout my kind of like adult life that I have all these different interests and I do all these different things, and I just literally cannot pick one thing. I have to kind of bounce around and have that kind of freedom.
Hmm.
So I but I also realize that, people, even if they have like a main job, like if they're an accountant or if they're a lawyer or if they're a construction worker or whatever, like that's never the only, no one does just one thing, and everyone has a story. And that's the tagline of the show, because that's what I realized, that I came up with a set of questions to kind of coax out that story and to kind of trace, like loosely trace people's path and look at, kind of like you're saying, where did you start? And so it's like, what was your childhood dream? And it doesn't matter if you didn't end up doing it or not, but it's just, it's interesting to kind of to see that, and where you are and what happened in between. And yeah, it's kind of evolved into uh, it's got this kind of like life of its own now, and I'm really enjoying, like, again, learning from different people, getting their perspective, getting their wisdom, their advice, and sharing it with people.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that, and
And
just kind of finding,
yeah.
just figuring out what makes people tick. Like, okay, yeah, at this point, late in your life, you've settled into this as your thing, and then you've said before that that's what you identify as. But there are so many other things that you do, and so many other things that went into making you who you are. That I love that
Mhm.
this kind of study of humanity and how people settle into things and the other things that they're into. I love that.
Yeah. Another thing I love about the show is it kind of started based around that idea of that, we're supposed to have so much of our lives figured out by the age of 30, and a lot of these other common cultural narratives and ideas have kind of come forward, and I base several of the questions on them because I'm like, I want to challenge these ideas because again, I think a lot of people just they kind of hear it, or it's kind of implied, and they just accept it, but they're not true, they're not accurate, and they kind of hurt people sometimes. So I like to hear, present these ideas to my guests, and kind of get there, and like, yeah, everyone's just kind of like, yeah, no, I didn't have hardly anything figured out by 30, or like, just what are some of the other, there's a few other of these, like, these ideas um
Mm.
that I've kind of pushed back against, and I feel like that's become a part of the heart of the show as well.
Yeah, that touches on the thing that bummed me out when I got older was that you have this idea as a kid that adults know what they're doing. Adults always seem to know what they're doing, and they've got the adult thing down or whatever. And then you get older and you're like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't know how to make decisions. Like I'm just trying and stumbling. Like I have no idea. But I thought adults were supposed to know when they. So I love, yeah, kind of
Yeah.
taking apart some of those tropes.
Yeah, and my goal is eventually, like, I've had one elderly person on the show so far, and I want to have more. I want to have teenagers on. Like, I want to literally get, like, kind of all of, different parts of society to kind of share their perspectives and their experiences. And but I just, for anyone who's watching, I want everyone who watches to be able to get something out of each episode. So I want, and that's why I end the show on advice for a teenager, advice for a 30-year-old, and advice for like an elder, because it's interesting. And a lot of, this is another idea, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't think I would have anything to say to an older person, and that's an idea that, again, a lot of us have internalized, that like people that are older than us, we can't teach them anything because they're wiser. And it's like, no, there's everyone can teach everyone something. And so I'm trying to, to get those ideas, and just, if any, because again, I would love for like teenagers, or for my show, like, I keep my show clean and PG because it would be awesome if it could be, shown in schools, or parents could watch it with their kids, and learn something from that, and kind of help them see their future a little bit differently, and maybe a little bit more optimistically, or something like that. And that just, I love that.
Wow, that's so wonderful, and that's a interesting note on the show. I do try not to swear on this show, but yeah, I wonder if like there is some thought to be had of what
I
what
mean,
could open
yeah,
it up
that's
a little bit more to a wider
That's
audience.
just the decision that I've made, because I've always wanted to try and keep my stuff more accessible and more just applicable to more people. And like, I do swear in real life. I do have some less popular ideas, but yeah, the show, I try to keep it like genuine and wholesome, and really, again, highlight the guest, highlight their story. It's about them, not about me, and hopefully everyone that watches can learn something from each episode.
So, what are your plans for tomorrow? Are you doing anything particular or special for Trans Day of Visibility? Do you have anything coming out artwork wise or anything?
I wish that I could say that I did. I took tomorrow as a vacation day because I figured it was going to be a bit of a later night tonight, and I just wanted to, like, be able to sleep in guilt free,
Well, I like that.
um, and just kind of like take tomorrow a bit slower. And Um, yeah, I think I kind of want to, like, do a stream of some sort on Twitch. I just don't quite know what yet, but
Hmm.
um Yeah, I just yeah, things have been a little kind of chaotic and in flux for me lately, so it's been a little bit harder for me to kind of. That's why I said yesterday. I literally realized yesterday, like, oh yeah, Trans Day of Visibility, because it hasn't been on my mind because so many other things have.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I totally get that. We've got a lot of things going on here at the Transverse. You know, first thing in particular is tomorrow we've got two shows where we're finally moving Valkyries to Wednesday and sticking to that. That'll be on at 6 Pacific, 9 Eastern. I know most people think that I say that backwards. It should be 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific, 8 Central is when the Valkyries episode will be, and that'll be an hour. And then we've got a new show coming on after that, which is the Builders Block, where we'll be cycling through a different builder each week, who will do, you know, whatever they build. So we've got a Lego builder, we've got a mech builder, and then I'm starting off tomorrow's episode because it's easier just because I've got the command center set up. But I will be working on one of my droids tomorrow. From that would be then 7 Pacific, 10 Eastern.
I'll have to tune into the reruns of those because that sounds interesting. But that's yeah, I'm usually asleep by 10 o'clock Eastern.
Fair enough, fair enough. But yeah, that's a new show we're rolling out tomorrow, and we're really excited about that as we start to expand out the channel. So hope everybody can come and watch that, you know, or at least like you said, catch it on the VOD later. But yeah, it's got some fun things going out. So I don't know if we're gonna. I mean, the Valkyries episode will heavily feature topics about the Trans Day of Visibility, but that might be about all I get to too, because the show tonight is going to wipe me out, and then getting ready for 2 shows tomorrow. A lot of stuff to do. Well, I'm going to quit yapping. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lacey, for being on the show and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure.
Hope you had a good time. Everybody in the chat, thank you so much for asking all your questions and putting in your comments. I really appreciate it, and I hope you had a good time tonight. And let me go over here and see if we've got somebody we can raid into really quick. Oh, Ashley Versus is going. Let's raid over into her. But yeah, we'll see you all tomorrow at 6 Pacific, 9 Eastern, 8 Central. If I could type. There we go.
We're still on, or?
Don't know. So the thing is
Okay.
that with the way the raid works, it's confusing. It cuts out at different times, so we're never quite sure we're out. So I raided over. We're done there.
Switched. Okay.